Good evening, everyone, and I hope all of you are in good health and doing absolutely fine. Students, welcome to this open session on the art of writing case studies. Case studies, नाम सुनते ही अजीब सा लगने लगता है. When it comes to GS paper 4, all the aspirants, they understand that case studies is perhaps the most important and significant portion of GS paper 4. Well, why is case studies so important and why everyone is so much concerned about case studies? How to write a good case study? What should be the ingredients to write a good case study? All of that we will try to see in this session. Also, students, at the fag end of the class, I will try to attempt one case study for you from the previous year's question papers so that we apply the knowledge that we derive from this class. Clear? But before I come to how to write a case study, or I actually take a case study for example and try to resolve that for you, let us try to understand why case studies, or what is the importance of case studies. From there we will start our session today. So we are asking few questions to ourselves, and the first question is, why case studies so important? What is the significance of case studies? Well, see friends, it was 2013 when UPSC amended its civil services main written examination pattern and incorporated a new paper called GS paper 4, or Ethics, Integrity and Aptitude. And one portion of that paper was dedicated to case studies. In 2013, the most searched Google item vis-a-vis the UPSC Civil Services main examination was how to solve a case study. मतलब 2013 में सबसे ज़्यादा लोगों ने गूगल पे जाके ये सर्च किया, जैसे ही यूपीएससी ने सिलेबस अमेंड किया, सब कूद गए गूगल पे और सब ने यही सर्च किया, हाउ टू राइट अ गुड केस स्टडी और हाउ टू सॉल्व अ केस स्टडी. 7 years have passed. We have seen 7 mains and it still remains the number 1 search item. It means case study still remains an unresolved riddle. It is the Achilles heel for most of the aspirants. Why? Why is so much, you can understand, anxiety, or what is the significance of case studies? Well, friends, if you look at the weightage of the case studies, you will see that nearly 120 marks make up the case study section. Do you understand that? And this 120 is almost 50% of GS paper 4. So it's actually 125, that's exact 50%, so approximately 50% of GS paper 4. So इसी से पता लग जाता है that case study, why it is so important. In fact, case study is the key to score big in GS paper 4. Those aspirants who perform absolutely good in case studies section or extraordinarily in case studies section, generally they end up getting more marks. Well, that doesn't mean that the theoretical section does not fetch you marks. It only means that the chances of scoring percentage wise or proportion wise more lies in the case study section if written well. Do you understand that? So just by looking at the weightage of the case study, we understand that case study is an important part of GS paper 4. Further, there is no book available in the market, and let me tell you, there will be never a book available on the market which can tell you that this is the way you should write a case study, because there is no single approach to handle the case studies. There can be multiple approaches to handle the case studies. Therefore, you see, a large number of aspirants they are bewildered and they are perplexed by the thought that how they should attempt the case studies. तो एक तो वेटेज बहुत ज्यादा है और दूसरा पता नहीं है कि कैसे इसको सॉल्व करें. Do you understand that? Now, if you have a look that why the case studies were incorporated in GS paper 4, सिर्फ थ्योरी पूछ लेते एथिक्स का काफी था. Why case studies were incorporated, or what was the purpose for the incorporation of case studies? Well, the case studies were incorporated because of two things. So I can say that there was a dual purpose behind the incorporation of case studies in GS paper 4. And what was that? First was to check the ethical competence of the aspirant by giving him models of real world situations. मतलब जब आप एक IAS ऑफिसर बन जाओगे या IPS ऑफिसर बन जाओगे या कोई भी सेंट्रल सर्विसेज ऑफिसर एज एन ऑफिसर आप सर्व करोगे, what kind of problems will you encounter and whether you have the ethical competence to handle those problems. See, competence can be intellectual competence as well as ethical competence. So, one purpose for the incorporation of case study was to check or to evaluate the ethical competence of the aspirants by giving them situations that were similar or that were reminiscent to real world situations. And that's why you would see in most of the case studies there is a basic assumption and you will become as one of the main actors of that case study, often the protagonist of that case study. The case study would often revolve around you. That is what the question does. And questions are of this nature. If you were the SDM, if you were the SP, if you were the district magistrate, what would you do? Do you understand that? So, the idea behind the incorporation of case study, one basic idea was to check the ethical competence of the aspirants. कि intellectually तो competent हैं, क्या ethically भी competent हैं to serve into the services. Do you understand that? The second purpose for the incorporation of case studies was to check the decision making ability of the aspirants. Now you see, decisions, when you make decisions, either you make the decision by keeping the law in mind, or you make the decision by keeping the ethics in mind. So a decision can be legally correct, a decision can be ethically correct. What was sought here was to check how much your decisions are in tune with the ethics of the society, or how much your decisions were ethically correct, or how much your decisions are ethically correct, or how much you have the ability to make ethically correct decisions. ये देखना था. Do you understand that? Why? Because on the basis of decisions only, actions are taken. And you know that with the advent of good governance, administration has become proactive or action oriented, and all actions are preceded by decision making. So the decision that as an officer you are going to make should not only be legally correct, but it should also be ethically correct. Do you understand that? So that is the significance of case studies. So I'm repeating one more time that obviously it has an enormous weightage, and if you do well in the case studies, you get your chances of clearing the examination increases because you get handsome marks in GS paper 4. Then there is no book available on case studies, और ये बात आज बिल्कुल गांठ बांध लो कि कभी होगी भी नहीं. Why? Because case studies are a very dynamic part of your syllabus. they mostly relate to the applied ethics. Do you understand that? An application can differ from context to context. So there is a particular context, and within that context only things are applied. So we cannot just fix the context, so we cannot fix the applications, and thus there will never be a complete book. There can be some rudimentary books, there can be some very basic books on case study writing, but there cannot be a complete book on case studies ever. It is not practically possible. Do you understand that? The reason behind the incorporation of case studies was first to check the ethical competence of the aspirants, that how much the aspirants are competent to ethically handle an issue which was very similar to a real world issue which they might encounter when they will go into these services. ये पहला purpose था. And second purpose was to check the decision making ability of the aspirants, because with good governance, administration has become proactive or action oriented, and decisions precede actions. So a decision has not only to be legally correct, but it has to be ethically correct in order to achieve the core credentials of good governance. Do you understand that? So the idea of incorporation of case studies to a large extent was ultimately to prepare the aspirants for the purpose of delivery of good governance. Do you understand that? So this was the reason for the incorporation of case studies. अच्छा, एक चीज हम ये देखते हैं that which are the topics from where case studies are asked. This I have also discussed in one of the previous live sessions, but I'm just trying to produce a revision here of that. See, if we have to look at the topics from where case studies are asked, we will find that there are three important areas from where you will get the case studies. 120 marks, 6 questions, and from 2013 to 2019 mains, all the mains that we have seen, that the number of questions have remained more or less the same, and the weightage has also remained more or less the same. If we analyze the previous 7 years question papers, we will find one thing, that there are 3 major areas from where case studies arise. And what are these 3 areas? The first and the most important, and if you ask me, perhaps the lion's share of the case studies come from this area, and that area is administrative ethics, which is the 6th unit in your syllabus. देखो, जो केस स्टडी लिखा हुआ है वो 8th टॉपिक है, और वो ऐसा लिखा हुआ है केस स्टडीज ऑन अबव इश्यूज. But I'm saying that nearly more than 50% of the case studies that have been asked so far in the examination, they come from only one unit, and that is administrative ethics or ethics in public administration. Also, it is having some case studies that relate to values in public services. Clear? और होता यह है कि इन केस स्टडीज में मोस्टली पीपल एंड अप राइटिंग पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन and not ethics in public administration. Do you understand that? The second more important area as far as case studies are concerned is the 7th unit, which is probity in governance. In fact, the whole concept of probity in governance is a subset of administrative ethics or ethics in public administration. Clear? But anyhow, look here. Probity in governance, case studies related to work culture, case study related to RTI, case studies related to, say, code of conduct. Clear? Case studies related to quality of service, and case studies related to corruption. It means case studies related to almost all the topics that are contained in the 7th unit. This is the second area from where the case studies are created. There is a third area also from where the case studies are primarily created. And the third area is the third unit, which is aptitude and foundational values of civil services. ये जो foundational value वाला part है, the second part of the third unit, that is also foundational values in civil services. That is the third important region जहाँ से case studies create होते. Do you understand that? Now look here, that in fact it doesn't mean that the questions only restrict with respect to these three topics. What I'm trying to say is most of the case studies, and when I say most, consider 90% of the case studies come from these three areas, and in these three areas also this unit, which is the 6th unit, administrative ethics, holds the lion's share as far as the questions are concerned. Many times you have seen questions would be which make you to imagine yourself as a district magistrate, as a district collector, as an SDO, as an SDM, as a CMO or a Panchayati Raj officer or something like that. Do you understand that? So these case studies mostly relate from the administrative ethics section. Do you understand that? क्या इसका मतलब ये है कि बाकी जो यूनिट पढ़ा है उसका तो कोई मतलब ही नहीं, because 8th topic says case studies based on above topics. It means there are other topics as well. Attitude, aptitude, emotional intelligence, for example, are they not asked in the case studies? Well, that is not the case, my friend. The point is that things like attitude, things like aptitude, and things like emotional intelligence, which are parts of social psychology and relate to ethics as well, they are automatically checked when case studies are asked. Like say for example, देखो एक simple सा case लेते हैं जिससे कि हमको ये चीज थोड़ी और clear हो जाए. Think of this, that you are in charge of a pension scheme, and under that scheme what happens is those who are above the 60 years age mark, they are given an annual pension of 5,000 rupees from the government, provided that they belong to the BPL category. It means below poverty line. मतलब वो गरीब लोग जो बूढ़े हैं उनके लिए सरकार ने एक स्कीम बनाई है कि 5,000 रुपए आपको मिलेंगे. Do you understand that? But एक ही कंडीशन रखी है, that they have to be below the poverty line. And suppose you are the officer in charge for the implementation of this scheme. It's a very simple scheme. Do you understand that? Now what happens is one day an old man walks up to you and you understand that he is above 60 years of age. He is also very poor. But what he lacks is, he lacks the below poverty line certificate, or he has no documentary evidence to showcase that he is an entitled beneficiary under the scheme. समझ लो ये है. Do you understand that? Now suppose if you just stick to the rules and regulation and you say that if you lack the document, I will not be able to consume you as a beneficiary under the scheme, then definitely your attitude towards the weak and the vulnerable sections are automatically checked. Also, your emotional intelligence vis-a-vis the weak and the vulnerable sections of the society are automatically checked. So ऐसा नहीं है कि अगर case studies 6th number topic, 7th number topic या foundational values on civil services. What are the foundational values? Like say for example, integrity, impartiality, non-partisanship, dedication to service, transparency, accountability, tolerance and all of that, right? There can be other values like perseverance, some of them not mentioned in the syllabus directly, but there are many values, clear? So these values based case studies are also made at times to check your attitude and your emotional intelligence vis-a-vis the public. Do you understand that? Ultimately, the aim of the incorporation of GS paper 4 is to make you ethically competent so that the promise of good governance can be delivered and ultimately the welfare state which the constitution has promised can be built. ये actual idea है. Do you understand that? Now, so we understand that these are the topics from where the case studies are mostly built. Let us also now try to understand that what type of case studies are asked. Mostly. देखो, अब type तो कुछ भी हो सकता है. But if you analyze the previous year's question papers, you will find that there are three major types of case studies that are asked. And what are they? First, in which there are certain options given to you. Option A, B, C, and D. And you are asked to choose the most appropriate option by giving ethical justification. Do you understand that? तो ये एक type हो गया. The second type of case study is where no options are created or no options are given to you. Rather, the question asks you, what options do you have under these circumstances? Critically examine the merits and demerits of each option and choose the most appropriate option. तो एक तो केस ऐसे आते हैं जहां आपको सीधा ABCD दिया हुआ होता है और उसमें से आपको एक चूज करना होता है. Or sometimes there is also a sub part of that type of question which says that produce any other option which you deem fit and which can be ethically defended. Something like that. Clear? The second type of case study is that where the question asks you to create the options. You create the options and then examine the merits and demerits of each option. And after that, you choose the most appropriate option giving reasons. और यहाँ पे जब reasons की बात होती है, these are ethical reasons or ethical justifications by which you can defend your choice. तो ये दूसरे तरीके के केस स्टडीज हैं. तीसरे तरीके के केस स्टडीज जो अक्सर पूछे जा रहे हैं, they are those case studies which deal with conflict of interest. Conflict of interest means where two interests clash. Now, these interests can belong to different stakeholder or to the same stakeholder. Like say, for example, a clash between personal interest and public interest. A clash between two interests held by the same person. So, इस तरीके के भी कुछ questions होते हैं which deal with conflict of interest, or you would see that these type can also be put under the category of ethical dilemma or ethical paradoxes. Ethical dilemma is that kind of situation where you have two competing values and you cannot choose both of them. You have to opt for one, and by doing that you will forego the other. It means you have to make some sacrifice in order to pick one value, or you give preference of one value over the other, and thereby you make your decisions. Because if you do not resolve the ethical dilemma, you will not be able to take any decisions. और अगर आप कोई decisions नहीं लोगे तो policy paralysis हो जाएगा. And if there is policy paralysis, obviously you understand there cannot be any form of good governance. Do you get that? So these are the three major types of case studies that are asked in the last 7 years question paper. If you see the type of questions, you will find that these are the three major types of case studies. पहला जिसमें आपको option दिए हुए होते हैं and you are asked to choose the most appropriate option and defend it ethically. Second, where you have to create the options and you have to examine the options critically by analyzing the merit and demerit of every option, and then you have to choose the most appropriate course of action. Obviously, the best option is what you have to choose. It means case studies also include the art of ethical judgment, और ethical judgment ही कुछ नहीं है, बस ये है decision making, which is morally or ethically correct. A decision can be legally correct or it can be ethically correct. तो जो ethically correct decision making का art है, उसे ही कहते हैं ethical judgment. Do you understand that? And the third kind of case study is where there is a clash between the conflicts, or there is a clash between the interests rather, so we call it conflict of interest, or there is clash between the values which we call as ethical dilemma or ethical paradoxes. Do you understand that? तो इससे तो अभी तक हमने ये समझ लिया that why the case study is so important, why it was incorporated into the examination, what are the topics from where case studies are asked, and what type of case studies are asked. Do you understand that? Now we will try to understand, or we will try to answer the most important question, और जिसके लिए शायद आप ये सेशन अटेंड भी कर रहे हैं, हाउ टू सॉल्व अ केस स्टडी. ये सब बातें तो ठीक है, सब अपनी जगह है, बट आंसर कैसे लिखें, हाउ टू सॉल्व अ केस स्टडी. सो दैट वुड बी अवर नेक्स्ट क्वेस्ट. वी विल ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ शुड वी सॉल्व अ केस स्टडी. Now see, there is no single approach to solve a case study. A case study can be handled in multiple ways. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि ये जो अप्रोच मैं आपको बताने वाला हूँ अभी बस ये ही तरीका है केस स्टडी सॉल्व करने का. But I'll tell you the most generic approach and the most accepted approach. It means if you follow this approach, then you will be able to write good case study answers. But I'm telling one more time, this is not the only approach by which you can write case studies, but you will see that this is in fact the most comprehensive of all the approaches that anyhow there exists vis-a-vis the resolution of case studies. So we are now having a look at how to solve a case study. It means we are talking about the approach to solve a case study. It means we are finding solutions for a case study. So I am telling you a generic approach. And you can make some slight adjustments to this approach depending upon your own answer writing skill. Because see students, I always believe कि हमें ऐसे ऑफिसर्स चाहिए जो डिसीजन ले सके. वो ऑफिसर्स नहीं चाहिए जो लगे कि किसी फैक्ट्री से निकल कर आए हैं, कि उनमें कुछ इनपुट दे दिया गया है और वो रोबोट की तरह काम करते हैं. We do not want that kind of officers. We want that kind of officers who can actually take real-time, meaningful decisions that bring impactful changes in the life of the people, especially the weak and the vulnerable. That's why I'm only discussing with you the generic approach vis-a-vis resolution of case studies, and you can make slight modifications to this depending upon your own personal ability to handle a case study. Clear? So देखो, I will give you a 10-step procedure to handle the case studies. 10 step हम फॉलो करेंगे, and then we will take a case study and will apply these to understand that whether this works or not. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is you need to identify the facts of the case. Every case have some factual information. So at the beginning, when you are trying to learn the case study or you are trying to master the art of writing case studies, I would suggest सबसे पहले ये शुरू किया करो, identify the facts which are there in the case study. Why it is necessary to identify the facts? Because you see, while resolving a case study, often we make some assumptions. Do you understand that? Now, if we make the assumptions which are completely divorced from the facts, such assumptions become wild assumptions. And have encountered many such assumptions made by the aspirants when I evaluate their GS paper 4 sheets, answer sheets, right? So, in order to make rational assumptions. It means assumptions which pertain to reason. Like, if you are the district magistrate, then you must enjoy some powers, right? So this can be rationally thought of, or some wild assumptions, wild guesses can be made vis-a-vis the powers enjoyed by a district magistrate. So if you divorce yourself from the facts of the case, and the facts are directly given in the case on the surface, right? So have a look at the facts, identify the facts, and highlight the facts. That's the first step. We are looking at a 10-step procedure to solve case studies, right? So the first step is identify and highlight the facts that are there in the case. What is the reason behind doing it? The reason is to make rational assumptions and to avoid wild or unnecessary assumptions which do not relate to the case in any manner whatsoever. Do you understand that? Now, look here. जब आप केस स्टडी राइटिंग आपकी और निखरती चली जाएगी, then you will see that you no longer have to write these facts. What you need to do is you only underline the important facts that are there given in the question paper itself, and that would be sufficient, right? After all, you get 250 words to write the case study. अब आप facts, stakeholders, values सब लिखते चलेंगे तो हो सकता है 250 words तो वहीं खत्म हो जाए. Do you understand that? So you need to address the question that is asked, and while answering the questions you have to highlight all of this. But when you are trying to write case studies for the first time at least, you should write the facts. यहाँ से शुरुआत करो कि केस में जो भी important facts हैं उनको हम लिखेंगे. And when you do that, what happens is you create a factual summary of the case study. ये पहला stage है. Clear? The second stage is, or the second step is, you try to identify the stakeholders that are there in the case. Now see, stakeholders means those who are affected by the case. There may be some sections of the population or some individuals or some groups who are directly affected by the case or who are mentioned in the case. Such kind of stakeholders are known as specific stakeholders. Sometimes they are also referred as primary stakeholders. मतलब ये वो stakeholders हैं जिनका direct association है case के साथ. Like say for example, like when we discussed the old man who was seeking a pension under a government scheme, and you being the officer in charge for disbursing the pensions, then you and the old man, they become specific stakeholders in the case as far as that case was concerned. Why? Because there is a direct involvement of both of you in that case, or you are the primary entities who get affected either positively or negatively by any action or by not taking of that action. Do you understand that? All the other stakeholders who may get affected indirectly can be clubbed under the generic category of stakeholders. These are also sometimes referred to as other stakeholders. Do you understand that? देखो, जैसे कि एक हर केस में तो ये समझ लो पब्लिक और पीपल they become generic stakeholders, or people at large, society, that becomes generic stakeholders, right? So the second step while resolving case studies is you identify the stakeholders who are involved in the case. And suppose I have identified 4 stakeholders: stakeholder S1, stakeholder S2, stakeholder S3, stakeholder S4. If 3 of them have direct relation with the case or their names are mentioned in the case, then I would call them as specific stakeholders. Whereas the other stakeholder which has an indirect association with this case or might get affected by the case in an indirect fashion, that person would be a generic stakeholder. And mostly in most of the cases you will see that it is the people or the public that become the generic stakeholder. Clear? Good? Okay, now let's see the third step. The third step is where we identify the interests of the stakeholders. Every stakeholder has an interest, and we need to identify those interests first. Do you understand that? Like, say for example, in that case where the old man who came to you asking for the pension or wanted to get enrolled under the pension scheme, he had an interest. And what was that interest? The interest was the interest of self-preservation. Say for example, he wanted to live. Do you understand that? Because he wanted a monetary support which would help him to live. Do you understand that? So every stakeholder has some or the other interests. Do you understand that? Like, say for example, stakeholder S1 has a particular interest, let me call it as I1. S2 has an interest, let me call this as I2. S3 has an interest, let me call this as I3. Do you understand that? And you know, there can be situations where these interests come in conflict with each other. That is the conflict of interest. एक बार आपने stakeholders identify कर लिए केस के, उसके बाद आपने उनके interest identify कर लिए. Next step is to identify the situations where the interests clash or the conflict of interests. Do you understand that? So the fourth step is to find out the conflict of interests. And what is conflict of interest? It is nothing but clash between different kinds of interest. देखो जैसे कि एक interest ये हो सकता है personal interest. Personal interest can be an interest. Do you understand that? And it can clash with another interest, like say for example public interest. So this is known as conflict of interest. तो आपको ये देखना पड़ेगा कि इस केस में सबसे पहले देखो बहुत आसान है conflict of interest find out करना, मुश्किल नहीं है. Only thing is you need to find out the interest. और जैसे ही आप interest देख लोगे, automatically you will see the beauty that you will be able to identify the conflict of interest that are inherent in that case. Do you understand that? And you yourself can be a stakeholder in that case, and therefore your interest might also clash with interest of some other stakeholder. So that might also create conflict of interest. Similarly, the same stakeholder might have more than one interest. Like say for example, personal interest and professional interest. Both are your own interest. And there can be a clash between these two types of interest as well. Suppose the stakeholder S1 has two interests, I0 or I0 and I1. So there can be a clash between the two interests held by the same person or between interests held by different stakeholders, and that can be groups, entities, anything. Do you understand that? So conflict of interest tak hum pahunch gaye. Now you see, every interest has an underlying value. Do you understand that? What are values? Remember, values are something which you cherish and which guide your attitude, which also guide your beliefs, which also guide your behavior. It also guides your actions. Do you understand that? So every interest has an underlying value. So next thing is to identify the underlying values of the various interests. Like say for example, that old man, he had an interest, and that interest was to have the pension. And what was the value, underlying value? Underlying value was perhaps his dedication or his valuing his own life. He values his own life. That's why he wants to survive. And that's why he has an interest in the program. Do you understand that? So every interest has an underlying value. Similarly, you can understand that interest I1 can have an underlying value V1. Similarly, I2 may have an underlying value V2. I3 may have an underlying value V3. Do you understand that? And when interests clash, actually it is not clash of interests, it is clash of values, because value is the underlying asset over which the interest is built. Interest एक superficial building की तरह है, value उसका fundamental block है. Do you understand that? So once we identify the various values that are underlying the different interests which can be held by different stakeholder or by the same stakeholder, next thing is we see where these values clash. And you know, clash of values is nothing but ethical dilemma. Do you understand that? So the next step automatically becomes to identify the situations of ethical dilemma, also known as ethical paradoxes. क्लियर? अब देखो, जैसे कि दो ड्यूटी है, आपस में उलझ गए, आप कौन सी ड्यूटी करो? ड्यूटी टुवर्ड्स योर फैमिली, ड्यूटी टुवर्ड्स नेशन. यहां पर दो मतलब एक एथिकल डिलेमा जैसे सिचुएशन हो गई. And you know, duty based ethics is deontological ethics. So that kind of dilemma would be known as the paradox of deontology. Do you understand that? How do we solve these dilemmas? Well, that's an altogether different debate, and we will see that when we handle the case studies. Okay. Now, so look here. Once we have identified the values, और एक बार हमको अगर वैल्यू मिल गए, बस उन वैल्यूज को आप एक दूसरे के साथ लड़ाकर देख लो, and you will understand that which values come in direct confrontation with each other, and by that logic you will be able to identify the situations of ethical dilemma or ethical paradoxes. Do you understand that? Then once we have done that, we have to next produce or evaluate the various options that we have under that case. Now, options mostly relate to the various decisions that we can take or the various actions that we can take. It means the various decisions that we can make and the various actions that we can take. Do you understand that? तो या तो वो क्वेश्चन में दिए होंगे आपको, then you only need to evaluate them, and evaluation means when you check the merits or the demerits. Like if I follow this particular action, then maybe I will be compromising on this particular value and this interest needs to be sacrificed. That becomes the demerit, whereas the merit would be if I follow this particular action, I will be able to hold this value, I will be able to uphold this interest, and thus I will be able to serve this stakeholder. Now obviously you need to prioritize the stakeholders from by doing a vulnerability mapping कि कौन सा stakeholder सबसे ज़्यादा vulnerable है. Like say for example, if there are floods, say for example, who are the most vulnerable? Maybe the Divyang, they become most vulnerable. Those who are in captivity becomes more vulnerable. Do you understand that? The elderly, the children, they become more vulnerable. So if you are heading a rescue operation, then you should give primary focus or you should give primary weightage to the most vulnerable sections or the most vulnerable stakeholder. Do you understand that? तो ये आपको करना पड़ेगा. Next is to produce. अगर वो नहीं लिखा हुआ है options तो आप खुद create करोगे वो options, and that becomes very easy. Once you have identified the stakeholders, once you have identified the interests, you know the values, you know the conflict of interest, you know the ethical dilemmas, you can easily identify the options. Do you understand that? And once you identify the options, evaluate those options. And once you have evaluated them, write the demerit and the merit of those options. Do you understand that? देखो, ये जो step 2 से लेकर step 7 तक है, इसे हम टेक्निकली कहते हैं ethical mapping. because you have created the background now to take the decision. Do you understand that? अभी तक तो आपने कोई डिसीजन थोड़ी ना लिया है, आपने तो सिर्फ आइडेंटिफाई किया है. There is all identification, production, evaluation. There is no decision yet. Do you understand that? And why is the case studies incorporated? To check your ethical competence. This is the ethical competence that is checked, and then what is checked is how good you are in making ethical decisions. Do you understand that? So the next step is when you actually make the ethical decision, or this is known as the step of ethical judgment, where you choose an appropriate action or course of action, or you choose one decision over all the available decisions. Do you understand that? तो ये स्टेप जो है, इसके लिए यहां तक पहुंचने के लिए we need to systematically build the case. मुश्किल क्या होती है एस्पिरेंट्स के साथ? They start with this, that under the given case, what will you do? If that is the question, they say, I will not do this, or I will do this, and then they start. Do you understand that? It means that they focus on this, whereas the focus should be on building the precedents that lead to this. In fact, ये decision आपका कुछ भी हो सकता है. The only thing you need is, you need to ethically justify your decisions. Do you understand that? The evaluator is not interested in your decision. He is interested behind the ethics that have motivated you to take that decision. Do you understand that? So, once you have produced, you have evaluated the various options available, next is you choose the most appropriate decision. This is where you give preference to one value over the other value, one stakeholder over the other stakeholder, one interest over the other interest. It means this is the stage of making value judgment. It means you are making some sort of judgment in the light or in the context of the values. Here, your personal ethics, your professional ethical training, as well as your conscience all help you in taking the decision. That's the 8th stage. But more marks are embedded in the 9th stage. And what is the 9th stage? The 9th stage is when you justify your decisions, or I should call this as the stage of ethical justification, कि आपने ये डिसीजन क्यों लिया था, उसके पीछे के कारण आप बताते हो. Do you understand that? Here you justify the decision that you have taken. Do you understand that? And how do you justify it? By application of ethical reasoning. So here you apply ethical or moral reasoning, and on the basis of that you justify your decisions. अब देखो, mostly यहां पर खत्म हो जाता है, if I can say roughly, I'm giving you a rough figure, 90% of the aspirants who are writing the civil services main examination, they end their case studies here. It means they give the ethical judgment and they feel that the case study is over, but the case study is far from over. अभी तो आपको justify करना पड़ेगा कि आपने ये decision क्यों लिया था. Obviously, you have chosen one value over the other, you have taken one interest over the other, or you have given preference to one stakeholder over the other. पर क्यों किया? What is the reason? Do you understand that? So that you need to justify here. And how do you justify that? By moral reasoning, by ethical reasoning. इसका क्या मतलब होता है? Moral reasoning, ethical reasoning. It means here you take the help of the moral philosophers, जो मैंने आपको कहा था हमारे पहले ओपन लाइव सेशन में, कि जब तक हम मॉरल फिलोसोफर्स को इनकॉर्पोरेट नहीं करेंगे केस स्टडीज में, हमारे केस स्टडीज कंप्लीट नहीं होंगे. डू यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? सो वी नीड टू इनकॉर्पोरेट द मॉरल थॉट्स and ideas of various philosophers, moral philosophers. Do you understand that? Or you see one thing, that we take resort to various moral theories. Like there are many approaches, like the doctrine of double effect of St. Thomas Aquinas, utilitarian ethics of Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, deontological ethics of Kant, Gandhian ethics, ethics of Swami Vivekananda, social contract theory of Hobbes, Rawls, Rousseau, etc. तो हम कोई भी moral theory का help लेते हैं या किसी moral thought या idea का help लेते हैं, and then we justify our answers. देखो, like say for example, there is a judge who is making a judgment. समझ लो सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जज हैं and he is trying to pronounce a judgment. Do you think that he just sees the case, he evaluates the witness and he makes the judgment? That is not the case, dear. What happens is, like suppose if he is testing a law in the light of constitution to check whether the law is constitutionally correct or not, he reads the entire constitution and the interpretation of the constitution given by constitutional experts. And there also he tries to understand the constitutional philosophies. जैसे कि different philosopher ने constitution के बारे में कुछ कहा होगा तो वैसे, or in other cases also, like say for example, if it is a mob violence case or a protest case, and maybe the defenders would say that we did it because we were inspired by such and such philosopher, or such as such national leader, or such and such global leader or youth icon. Do you understand that? So the judges also evaluate the philosophy by highlighting the moral philosophy, or by highlighting the moral theory that has helped you in making the decision. You leave the examiner in a situation of quandary. अब वो आपकी बात को काट नहीं सकते, क्योंकि अगर आप बोलोगे मैंने ये डिसीजन इसलिए लिया है, I have helped the old man despite he was lacking documents, I helped him because Gandhiji said that if you want to check whether your action is correct or not, check whether it is helping the most vulnerable man standing at the last part of the queue. Do you understand that? अब तो आपकी बात जैसे जिसे कहते हैं ना अकाट्य हो गई, अब इसे काटा नहीं जा सकता. It becomes very difficult for the examiner or the evaluator now to not award you marks, because this is, remember, we are writing ethics, we are not writing morality. Morality can be very personal, but ethics is, there is a common understanding around ethics. Do you understand that? So therefore, when you back your judgments by ethical justification, by using ethical reasoning, definitely you fetch more marks. But abhi bhi case close nahi hua. Ultimately, at the final step, you have to give an appropriate conclusion of the case study. कि आप conclude कर दो उस case study को. Conclusion कैसे हो सकता है? You can use a quote. Like suppose this is a case study on war or nuclear weapons or something like that, और आपने ये quote use कर दिया that an eye for an eye will make the whole world blind. Do you understand that? Or if suppose there is a quote with respect to say communal, or there is a case study with respect to say communal riots or communal violence or something like that, you can use the quote given by Abraham Lincoln that when I do right I feel right, when I do bad I feel bad, that's my religion. Do you understand that? So you write a beautiful quote. Now writing a quote is just one way of concluding, there can be other ways as well. Conclusion simply means you leave an idea and allow that idea to float. देखो बहुत मुश्किल है ये करना, but आसान है अगर हम practice करते रहे. It means you just leave an idea, create a trail of thought and create an impact on the mind of the evaluator that you are beyond this case study. Do you understand that? It means your ethical competence is not just limited to this case, but it exceeds this case. Obviously, then it strengthens your case to get elected, or rather get selected in the examination. Do you understand that? तो या तो आप एक quote लिख दो, या तो आप कोई idea introduce कर दो, or what you can do is you can write some slogans, but this will all take practice. और एक बार practice कर लें, we will be able to do that, you will see. So I'm repeating one more time. See, I'm also telling you friends that this is one of the best approaches to solve the case study, but quote unquote, this is not the only approach to solve the case studies, but this is perhaps the most comprehensive of all the approaches that you will find to solve the case studies. अगर आप हार्वर्ड बिजनेस स्कूल में भी चले जाओ या कोई भी अच्छे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन या इंस्टीट्यूशन पे चले जाओ, उनके जो एथिक्स कमिटी जिस केसेस को हैंडल करती है, वो देखोगे आप कि दे फॉलो मोर और लेस द सेम अप्रोच इन रिजॉल्विंग दोज केस स्टडीज. एंड व्हेन वी एनकाउंटर केसेस vis-a-vis administration, governance, etc., we'll find that these steps are more or less followed. Clear? So, I'm repeating them one more time. सबसे पहले क्या करो? Identify the facts of the case. Create a factual summary of the case. This we can say creating the summary of this case. The second step is ethical mapping, where you highlight your ethical competence कि आपको कितना समझ में आया ये case. Do you understand that? So, for that, identify the stakeholders, identify the interests of the stakeholders, identify the conflict of interests, identify the underlying values under various interests, identify the ethical paradoxes or ethical dilemmas which are the clash of values, produce and evaluate the several options that you have. This is ethical mapping. यहां तक आपने कोई decision नहीं लिया है. Finally then there is ethical judgment. When you take ethical judgment, you choose one action over the other, one decision over the other, one value over the other, or you give preference of values, or you prioritize the interest, or you give preference to the stakeholders. कुछ भी हो सकता है. That depends upon the quality of the case and the nature of the case study, right? I'm giving you just a general description of how it should be. Then, once you have made the judgment, you need to defend that judgment. And you need to defend that ethically. And ethically defend means you have to justify it by using moral reasoning or ethical reasoning, where you make some sort of value judgment. Do you understand that? So you do that. The moral reasoning means you use the moral thinkers, thoughts, moral theories in order to obtain a particular conclusion. And then at the end, you should write the conclusion. The conclusion means you use a quote, or you use an idea, or you use a slogan or something. Conclusion should not be like a paragraph, a 2 to 3 line or something like that, which closes the case for all practical purposes as far as the civil services main examination is concerned. Do you understand that? अब ऐसा करते हैं, we take one case study from previous years and we will try to solve that case study by keeping all of this in mind. Clear? So let's try to have a look at a case study. The case study that I have picked today for this class is a case study from 2018 Civil Services Mains Examination. And it's a case study, जिस तरीके के case study कई बार पूछे जाते हैं. And there are many occasions where this type of case study is asked. Do you understand that? So, I have the question paper of the 2018 mains with me, GS paper 4, and this is question number 8. तो आप देख भी सकते हो इस केस स्टडी को डिटेल में जाकर कि ये केस स्टडी क्या कहता है, बट आई विल जस्ट रीड इट आउट फॉर यू सो दैट वी गेट द बैकग्राउंड ऑफ द केस एंड देन वील ट्राई टू सॉल्व दिस केस स्टडी. क्लियर? सो इट सेज, एज अ सीनियर ऑफिसर इन द मिनिस्ट्री you have access to important policy decisions and upcoming big announcements such as road construction projects before they are notified in the public domain. मतलब आप एक सीनियर ऑफिसर हो और मिनिस्ट्री में हो, आप इस पोजीशन पे हो कि कोई इंपॉर्टेंट गवर्नमेंट का डिसीजन या प्रोजेक्ट पब्लिक में आए उससे पहले आपको पता चल जाता है. डू यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? द मिनिस्ट्री इज अबाउट टू अनाउंस अ मेगा रोड प्रोजेक्ट for which the drawings are already in place. Sufficient care was taken by the planners to make use of the governmental land with minimum land acquisition from private parties. तो एक मेगा रोड प्रोजेक्ट अनाउंस होने वाला है और उसके लिए सब कुछ प्रिपेयर्ड है, बट अभी तक वो पब्लिक डोमेन में आया नहीं है, बट आप उसे देख सकते हो बिकॉज ऑफ योर पोजिशन एंड अथॉरिटी इन द मिनिस्ट्री. उस प्रोजेक्ट को अच्छे से डिजाइन किया गया है जिसमें मिनिमम लैंड एक्विजिशन हो. Minimum land acquisition means minimum displacement of the farmers, say for example if it is agricultural land, and minimum payment, compensation from the public exchequer. So दोनों तरह से एक फायदेमंद सौदा है ये. Compensation rate for the private parties was also finalized as per government rules. तो compensation भी तय हो गया. Care was also taken to minimize deforestation, because obviously you know when land acquisition is done for infrastructural projects, if the land has a green cover, that needs to be cut off. So deforestation भी इसमें बहुत कम हो रहा है अगर इस procedure और इस rules के हिसाब से चलें तो. Once the project is announced, it is expected that there will be a huge spurt in the real estate prices in and around that area. मतलब जैसे ही ये रोड बन जाएगी, इसके चारों तरफ जो भी रियल एस्टेट के प्राइसेस हैं, जो लैंड प्रॉपर्टी का जो वैल्यू है, that will skyrocket. It will go high in an exorbitant fashion. Clear? Next, the case goes as, meanwhile, the minister concerned insists you realign the road in such a way that it comes closer to his 20 acres farmhouse. He also suggests that he would facilitate purchase of a big plot of land in your wife's name at the prevailing rate, which is very nominal, in and around the proposed mega road project. He also tries to convince you by saying that there is no harm in it as he is buying the land legally. He even promises to supplement your savings in case you do not have sufficient funds to buy the land. However, by the act of realignment, a lot of agricultural land has to be acquired, thereby causing considerable financial burden on the government and also displacement of the farmers. As if this is not enough, it will involve cutting down of a large number of trees, denuding the area of its green cover. अब देखो हो ये रहा है कि सब कुछ ठीक है, लैंड एक्विजिशन भी कम हो रहा था, जो डिस्प्लेसमेंट ऑफ फार्मर्स है वो भी कम हो रहा था, डिफॉरेस्टेशन भी कम हो रहा था, बट मिनिस्टर जो है इंचार्ज उस मिनिस्ट्री के, उन्होंने आपको बोला है, यू आर अ सीनियर सिविल सर्वेंट ऑब्वियसली एट अ हाई पोजीशन इन दैट मिनिस्ट्री, उन्होंने आपको बोला है कि इस रोड को ऐसा करो कि मेरे फार्म हाउस की तरफ से मोड़ दो. डू यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? सी सेइंग 20 एकर्स फार्म हाउस है, उसके करीब से मोड़ दो, कुछ नहीं होगा. What will happen is he is also promising you that in the future the land prices will rise, and as the land prices will rise, you will also benefit because I will help you, assist you today in purchasing a piece of land in that area at the prevailing prices, which are very nominal. And you know for one that the land prices are going to go up because of the project. It is a mega project. Do you understand that? इसके लिए वो ये कहते हैं, and he also says that he will be taking the land, or he will assist you in taking the land, even he will do some financial help to you and help you to get that land in your wife's name. Do you understand that? But अगर आप ऐसा करते हो, अगर आप मिनिस्टर की बात को सुनते हो, तो क्या होता है देखो, if realignment of the road happens, then a lot of agricultural land has to be acquired, means land acquisition increases, thereby causing considerable financial burden on the government. Obviously, when you acquire land, you have to pay compensation under the Land Acquisition Act, and also displacement of farmers, because then farmers need to be moved from the agreeable land to some other place, and it might also create unemployment for the farmers. If they lack the skills and they are not absorbed by the industry, then there would be unemployment also. Do you understand that? And ओवर एंड अबव दिस, सबसे जो डेंजरस बात है इसमें वो है कि जो ग्रीन कवर है, जो फॉरेस्ट का एरिया है, वो और कट जाएंगे, और फॉरेस्ट काटने पड़ेंगे अगर रोड को मंत्री जी के फार्म हाउस के पास से ले जाया जाए. ऑब्वियसली वो अपना फार्म हाउस का वैल्यू बढ़ाना चाह रहे हैं. नाउ देयर आर 3 क्वेश्चंस दैट आर आस्क्ड टू यू अंडर दिस केस, एंड व्हाट आर द क्वेश्चंस? फर्स्ट, फेस्ड विद दिस सिचुएशन, व्हाट विल यू डू? So the first question is, what will you do? Because you are the senior civil servant, that's the first question. The second question is, critically examine the various conflicts of interest and explain what are your responsibilities as a public servant. So the second is, highlight the conflict of interests. And in that, we'll also try to see what are the ethical dilemmas involved in this case. और finally, इसी statement का एक और part है जिसको हम third question की तरह समझ सकते हैं, which is what are your responsibilities as a public servant. देखो, mostly what students will do is they will start in this order, that what you will do, then what are the conflict of interest, and what are the responsibilities as a public servant. Maybe a better approach would be first to find out what are the conflicts of interests, then what are your responsibilities as a public servant, and then when you do that, you will automatically see, you will get the solution what you need to do. But अगर conflict of interest हमें ढूंढना है तो उसके लिए तो हमको interest ढूंढने पड़ेंगे, और interest ढूंढने के लिए हमको stakeholders ढूंढने पड़ेंगे. Do you understand that? So let us see who are the stakeholders. In this case, obviously, you, the senior civil servant, is a primary stakeholder. So is the minister. The minister is also a direct stakeholder because he is heading the ministry for which you are working. Obviously, the government is a stakeholder because government, it's a government project and government has to pay compensation and all of that. Government has to acquire land. Then you can think of that also the farmers, they are also direct stakeholders or primary stakeholders. Why? Because their land is being acquired, even though compensation is being paid to them, but it is their land which is being acquired, so they are also primary stakeholders. Then you can think the people at large, they are generic stakeholders. Why? इनके क्या स्टेक है इसमें? सबसे पहला इनका स्टेक है इस रोड प्रोजेक्ट में ही, because you know that access to good public utilities or good public goods and services, it's a right of the people in a democratic setup. So अगर एक अच्छा रोड बन जाए तो लोगों के लिए तो अच्छा है. Do you understand that? So they have interest there. Also you see that if there is more deforestation, then obviously there is reduction in the green cover, and people along with the right to enjoy good public utilities also have the right to enjoy good environment. So there also the people have stakes. अच्छा एक बात बताओ आप मुझे कि अगर आप जंगल काटोगे, in the forest are there some species, flora and fauna? Now, their interest is also hurt here. You can say these are animal rights. Like you have human rights, these are animal rights. But the animals, they cannot defend themselves or they cannot defend their rights themselves. But what happens is they often take the help of, or rather they are being helped by the wildlife activists or the nature lovers. So they also become stakeholders. No need of crowding your case study with large number of stakeholders. Then you will get confused in the stakeholders and you will not be able to arrive at a conclusion in 250 words. ठीक, तो पहले तो हमने stakeholders identify कर लिए. कौन है stakeholder? आप हो जो civil servant है, government है, minister है जो आपको बोल रहे हैं रोड मोड़ दो, people at large, the farmers, and the wildlife. And we are saying wildlife means the flora and fauna, and their interest is represented by the nature activists or the wildlife activists or the nature lovers. It means those who are like they take personal initiative and they do not do activism on a professional ground, rather more as a, you can say, compassionate ground towards the animals. Now we can see the conflict of interests. What are the conflict of interest? First is there is a conflict between personal interest and public interest. देखो, अगर आपको जमीन मिल जाए, and if you are an honest civil servant, maybe it will become very difficult for you to purchase land there by using your salary money. Let me be very frank to you. Clear? और अगर आपको वो land मिल जाए, which the minister is saying that he is going to buy it legally, he is not doing any sort of corruption in purchasing the land. He is saying, I will assist you in buying the land legally, and in your wife's name it would be registered. I'll also assist you in the form of money. आप loan चुका देना बाद में. Do you understand that? If the price of the land goes up, and if you sell that land, you would get enough white money which will give your family a financial security. Is that not an interest for you? Yes, it is your personal interest. But when you do that, obviously you know that a lot of money is to be spent out of the public exchequer. You also see that farmers need to be relocated. Lot of agreeable land has to be, you can say, that needs to be acquired, and the green cover needs to be cleared. So it will hurt public interest or the interest of the people. You can also call it as social interest or something like that. Clear? That's the first conflict of interest. The second conflict of interest is following the orders of the superior or senior versus your personal ethical judgment, or you can say your conscience. Following the order of the superior. अरे मिनिस्टर ने बोला है आपको, आप उस मिनिस्ट्री में काम करते हैं, it is headed by the minister. The minister is saying you do it, and you know that by the Civil Services Code of Conduct there are rules which says that you need to take the orders given by your seniors seriously. तो ये एक interest है आपका, following the orders. And the second is your own personal ethical judgment, which is your own conscience, your own sense of right and wrong, whether this is correct or whether this is wrong. So let us only, because हम एक समझ रहे हैं generally there can be more conflict of interest, but let us just restrict ourselves to these two conflict of interest for now. Do you understand that? There can be more. Next, we see the ethical dilemmas that are involved in this case. Do you understand that? Now, when it is personal interest, what is the value, underlying value to it? It is self-preservation. Means every person has this right to preserve himself, to fend for himself. So that's the value which is underlying this interest, personal interest. कि आप खुद को सिक्योर करना चाहते हो, अपनी फैमिली को सिक्योर करना चाहते हो, और सब कुछ लीगली और वाइट मनी के थ्रू हो रहा है विदाउट एनी करप्शन, बिकॉज यू आर परचेजिंग इट लीगली एंड एवरीथिंग इज हैपनिंग इन द करेक्ट फैशन. सो इट इज सेल्फ प्रिजर्वेशन. दैट इज द वैल्यू which is guiding this interest or which is underlying this interest. Clear? Whereas when you look at public interest, जब आप इसके बारे में सोचते हो, the underlying value is integrity. And what is integrity? It's a foundational value of civil services which says that you will not do anything that demeans you or dishonors you. You will never move away from the set of ethical values, principles, etc. Means you will do the right thing even when nobody is watching. ये तो मिनिस्टर और आपके बीच में एक साठ गांठ की तरह है. Do you understand that? But if you have integrity, you will not do this, because by doing it, you compromise on public interest. And your duty as a civil servant is to uphold public interest, because that is your task. Do you understand that? You cannot give preference to your personal interest over the public interest. तो ये एक ethical dilemma हो गया. Self-preservation versus integrity. These are both values. Another ethical dilemma, like following the orders of the superior, this shows dedication to the rules, regulations, or the code of conduct suppose the rules say that you need to follow the orders of your superior. यही रूल है सिविल सर्वेंट्स में. तो समझ लो आप बस इस रूल को फॉलो कर रहे हो. Do you understand that? So in that way what happens is that the value which is underlying this rule is the dedication to the rules, regulation, code of conduct. तभी आप you are following the orders of your superior or senior. Do you understand that? The other value which you can think of which underlies this is the dedication to civil services or public services. एक तो है dedication to the rules and regulations. This is more, you can say, objective, whereas this is more ethical, where you make the dedication to public services. You are dedicated to the public services. You are dedicated to the cause of the people. Means it is people's interest that is supreme for you. Do you understand that? So there can be ethical paradoxes or ethical dilemmas vis-a-vis self-preservation, integrity, dedication to rules, regulation, code of conduct, and dedication to public services or dedication to civil services. Do you understand that? तो ये तो हमें ये वाला पार्ट मिल गया आंसर का, the conflict of interest. Let us now try to have a look at the responsibilities of a public servant. What are the responsibilities of a public servant? First is all public servants, in whatever capacity they are serving, they are all guardians of the public trust. ये responsibility है हर public servant की. What is public trust? Public trust means the people are the real rulers and the real owners, and they have placed a faith in you and you cannot breach that faith. That is public trust. So that's the, you can say that's the first responsibility as a public servant. Second, public servants who have access to financial resources are also custodians of public funds. पहरेदार हो. Do you understand that? Of public funds. You cannot misuse the funds. You cannot underutilize the funds. You cannot use the funds as if you are squandering the funds, because the funds are funded by taxing the people or through other sources from which money is collected. It is people's money and the custodians can only protect it. They cannot use it for their personal interest. Do you understand that? Third is, it is your responsibility to show integrity and impartiality in decision making. It means your decisions should be objective in nature. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए that when you take the decisions you are sacrificing integrity. Like say for example, if you go for this, then you are sacrificing public interest and the underlying value is integrity, which makes you to sacrifice the public interest. Do you understand that? Like if you lack integrity, you sacrifice the public interest. If you have integrity, you will not sacrifice the public interest. So whether you will sacrifice the public interest or not depends upon whether you have integrity or not. Do you understand that? So it is the responsibility of the public servant to take all decisions by keeping the principle of integrity and impartiality in mind. It is also the responsibility of public servant to stick to the code of ethics or the civil services code of ethics, which says that these actions needs to be performed. They can be normative statements. These actions should be performed, and these actions or these principles should guide your decision making. The ethical codes are those codes for civil services जो ये बताते हैं कि आपको इनको ध्यान में रखना चाहिए when you are actually taking a decision or you are performing an action. Code of conduct generally governs your action, whereas code of ethics governs your decision making capability. Do you understand that? Do you understand that? और एक और जो आपकी ड्यूटी है और रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, दैट इज टू शो कंपैशन towards weaker section of the population. And tell me, are the farmers, many of them, especially the small and the marginal ones, can they be put under the category of weak and vulnerable sections of the society? Yes, definitely. And as a civil servant, it is your responsibility to showcase compassion. Compassion का मतलब होता है, जिसे आप कह सकते हो एक तरीके का दया भाव, करुणा जिसे कहते हैं. Do you understand that? So you need to showcase compassion towards the weak and the vulnerable sections of the society. ये आपको करना पड़ेगा. That is your responsibility as a civil servant. So once we have identified the conflict of interests, we have identified the responsibilities as a civil servant, we will next go to what we need to do. देखो, इसके लिए हमारे पास 3 ऑप्शन है. पहला ऑप्शन ये है that you do what the minister is saying. Obviously, when you do that, you are avoiding any personal confrontation with the minister. Also, it is very good for the smooth functioning of you as a part of the bureaucracy, because the minister will never, he will never poke you. Do you understand that? So, it has a merit. Merit is personal interest is resolved, self-preservation is met, dedication to rules, regulations is done, and you are following the orders of the superior and the senior. यही हो गया आपकी merit. Whereas the demerit is, you see, you are foregoing public interest. You are not listening to the voice of your conscience. Means you are not putting yourself in the court of conscience कि ये सही है या गलत है. Do you understand that? You lack integrity, so you are foregoing integrity, which is a foundational value of civil services. You are also not showing dedication to the public services. Do you understand that? This is when what you do, when what the minister is saying, when you do that, you sacrifice all these kind of. Definitely, this cannot be your course of action. The second is कि go on a leave or shift the burden of decision making to some other officer. इसमें भी कुछ फायदे हैं. पहला फायदा तो ये है कि you will not come into confrontation with the minister, because the minister maybe he is too much eager to get the road realigned to his 20-acre farmhouse because he wants the price of his prime farmhouse to go up. You don't want to confront the ministers. हो सकता है कि you may be a senior level officer, but you feel that confrontation with the minister might not be good for the smooth functioning of your office. The minister may create many obstacles in the smooth functioning of your office. So that's why you go on a leave. आप छुट्टी ले लेते हो. Or you shift the decision making burden to someone else. कि मैं नहीं, गुप्ता जी देखेंगे. Do you understand that? Here he may be a senior civil servant or something like that. I told you the merit. The demerit would be that you are showing an escapist tendency. And we know by the Nolan 7 principles of public life that civil servants need to show leadership qualities in times of crisis. Whereas you are showing what? You are showing escapist tendency. आप भाग रहे हो वहां से एक तरीके का. This is a demerit, and obviously it does not lie in tune or is not in conformity with the Nolan principles, 7 principles of public life, and therefore this also cannot be your course of action. So we are left with one more choice. We can have more choices, but I am restricting myself due to the paucity of time. The third choice is, suppose you say that you will not do it. It means as the minister is saying. And obviously, this is your preferred choice of action. But आप ऐसे बोल थोड़ी ना सकते हो मिनिस्टर को कि नहीं हो पाएगा. अगर आपने ऐसा बोल दिया तो obviously you know उसके बाद क्या क्या होगा आपके साथ. So what you need to do when it says that you don't want to do it, how can you do that? See, there are some logical steps by which you can make the minister not to do it as well. And this is where the aptitude of a civil servant comes handy. Because देखो ये तो सुना होगा ना कि पूरा देश जो है actually bureaucrats ही चलाते हैं. Because they are men of aptitude. And you know that with their attitude and their aptitude, they actually make the differences. So what you do is, first way, within this step only, you say that I will persuade the minister. And what you will persuade the minister? You will tell the minister that, look sir, that if we realign the road as you are saying, there can be an inquiry commission in future because we have to pay more compensation. We have to acquire more land. There will be more clearing of forests. So there can be a future inquiry commission. Also, there can be an RTI application that who actually took this decision. And if these things are done, definitely your name will come into the picture. And if that happens, maybe the party president will throw you out of the party. Or you might not gain ministerial berth for a next time. Or your aspirations of the political life may totally get distorted. So why you are getting entangled in such petty issues? Rather look for the big picture. Look for your career as a political leader. Do you understand that? So you create, through the persuasion technique, you create fear in the heart of the minister. And then you give the solution. Because persuasion acts like that. First we create fear and then we give the solution. जैसे देखा है ना कि सींग लगाकर आ जाते हैं और बोलते हैं कि ऑफिस जा रहा है कोई, तो बोलते हैं उसे अब तक नहीं लिया इंश्योरेंस, तो ये लो 500 में इंश्योरेंस 2 करोड़ का. Do you understand that? So this is the best idea of marketing, is first you create fear and then you give the solution. कि सुबह उठे और दांत में कीड़े, ये लो नमक वाला टूथपेस्ट. So you give the solution. First you create the fear, then you give the solution. So persuasion can be a technique by which you can make the minister not to do it. But समझ लो आपने persuade किया, minister ने बोला कि हाँ ठीक है, हो गया, मैंने सुन लिया सब कुछ, सड़क तो वहीं से जाएगी, मेरे फार्म हाउस के पास से ही जाएगी, मोड़नी पड़ेगी. Now, what you are left with now? देखो, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट में जब डिसीजन मेकिंग होता है, so suppose there is a policy or there is a project which is getting approval at every stage and from different officers. So जो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट की फाइल होती है वो ऐसी होती है that on the left side you have a margin and that margin is the noting section where you write your notes, your views on that policy. Do you understand that? And on the right there is some draft which you write. In central government this is generally on the left, but from state government to state government this might differ, right? So ये जब एक ऑफिसर के पास फाइल आता है, ऑफिसर राइट्स हिज नोट्स, व्हाट ही फील्स अबाउट इट, और फिर आप सुपीरियर को पास कर दो. हो सकता है आपका नोट्स ना एक्सेप्ट करे वो, ऑब्वियसली आपके सुपीरियर, आपके सीनियर, वो जो बोलेंगे वही हो जाएगा. बट when RTI applications are filed, even this noting is considered as a form of information and courts might call it for inquiry. Under that circumstances, definitely you will be saved from the ordeal of the court, or the heavy hand of justice will not fall over you if you have made the right decision. Also, this will be in tune with the calling of your conscience, that you are not making an absurd decision. So you do a noting, and there in the notes you write that I feel this is the right way to go ahead with the project because there is minimum land acquisition, there is minimum rehabilitation, there is minimum destruction of the forests. So it is win-win situation for the people, for the animals, for the government, for everyone. So I feel this is the best decision, go ahead with this. Any modification in this, I do not suggest it. Obviously, when it goes to the minister needs to write it. If suppose to other senior civil servants which are between you and the minister, then they may give their notes, and depends upon how much is their ethical integrity. But if suppose all the civil servants write these kind of notes, then the minister has to write that I wish the road be realigned. Obviously, you understand, then the minister has fallen in the trap and maybe he will not be able to write that. So the public interest would be upheld. Do you understand that? But देखो, आपने ये सब कुछ तो कर लिया, बस समझ लो वो परसुएशन से भी नहीं मान रहे हैं, नोटिंग पे भी नहीं मान रहे हैं, वो ये कह रहे हैं कि हाँ मैं लिखूंगा कि रोड इधर से ही जाएगी, और इंक्वायरी कमीशन 6 चल रहे हैं, 7वां और बैठ जाएगा, क्या हो जाएगा? पिछली बार ऐसे ही मिनिस्टर था, अब इस बार तो कैबिनेट मिनिस्टर हूं, अगली बार देखो चीफ मिनिस्टर ना बन जाऊं तो मैं तो ऐसा ही करूंगा, क्या कर लोगे तुम? सपोज दिस इज हिज एटीट्यूड, डू यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? सो व्हाट यू नीड टू डू इज, देखो कई सारे एस्पिरेंट्स अब क्या बोलते हैं, अब वो मतलब हार जाते हैं क्योंकि उन्होंने बहुत कंपैशन भी दिखा दिया, दिस इज नोन एज कंपैशन फटीग, कि अब वो खत्म हो गया, उनको समझ नहीं आ रहा कि अब क्या करें, तो वो बोलते हैं आई विल गो इनटू द मीडिया and I will leak. I will be a whistleblower. Then I will leak it. These are extreme steps. And by being into the system, going against the system is neither desirable nor it is good. Why? Because then you are showing lack of faith in the ethical competence of the system. आप क्या कर सकते हो? देखो, you can write to the chief secretary of the state, who is a high level senior civil servant, or to the cabinet secretary, or to the chief minister himself, or to the prime minister, that sir, this is what I feel, that if this project is modified in any way, it will hurt the public interest, it will go against the right to have a clean environment, it will also hurt farmers' interest, and it will be a burden on the public exchequer, and that's why I wish you to please intervene into the matter and ensure that the project is not modified. Writing to the seniors within the system is not considered bad. In fact, it is considered good. Do you understand that? And maybe then a show cause notice would be issued against the minister who is pushing you to do that. And the show cause notice would read something like, show the causes why action should not be taken against you, be it the minister or the senior level civil servants. And then the minister, obviously you can understand, if he is hell-bent, then he will have to answer. Do you understand that? तो ऐसे आप ये बता सकते हो कि मैं नहीं मानूंगा उनकी बात. And by doing that, obviously there are many merits. You uphold the public interest. You are the guardian of the public trust. Therefore, upholding the public interest is your prime duty. You save the public money because you are the custodian of the public fund. You show integrity and impartiality in making decisions because you do not show partiality towards yourself. Do you understand that? There has to be a lot of self-control. इसके लिए ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि मिनिस्टर ने बोला कि अच्छा चलो ऐसा नहीं है कि मैं हेल्प ही नहीं करूंगा, पूरी जमीन ही मैं खरीद दूंगा, 3-4 और ले दूंगा, अब तो हाँ बोल दो. So there has to be a self price, and the price is no price. I will not bend to any unethical demand under any circumstances. ये होना चाहिए आपके अंदर. तो वो जब तक नहीं है तो मिनिस्टर का कोई बड़ा सा आपको प्राइस दे दे तो आप तो डगमगा जाओगे. Do you understand that? So this is what you need to keep in mind. Then obviously you are showing dedication to civil services and you are showing compassion towards the weaker section. मतलब अगर आप देखो conflict of interest और responsibility हमने ढूंढ लिया था पहले. That's why what you will do becomes automatically very easy. But then we need to justify this. It means ethical reasoning. तो चलो कुछ moral philosophies involve करते हैं यहां पे और समझने की कोशिश करते हैं कि ये कैसे हुआ. Thomas Hobbes, or the Hobbesian logic of social contract, is upheld. Social contract क्या है? It's a theory in ethics which says that people have come into a contract wherein they have forgiven some of their rights for general benefits and have made the civil servants the custodians of the public fund and the guardians of the public trust. So this social contract of Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, is not broken. इससे आप डिफेंड करते हो इसको. Second, if you look at John Rawls' principle of justice, one principle of justice is the max-min principle. It means if there is any favor, then the benefits of the favor should go to the most vulnerable sections. जब आप सोचते हो कि नहीं मैं रोड बना लूंगा अपने लिए, जैसे मिनिस्टर कह रहे हैं वैसे बना लेता हूं रोड, then you are giving preference to your personal interest or the minister's interest. And definitely you or the minister are not the vulnerable sections of the society, but farmers are definitely. So by not heeding to the advice of the minister and by not wavering from your ethical path, you uphold John Rawls' Maximin principle, you uphold social contract, you uphold John Rawls' Maximin principle. And if you listen to the minister and do what he says, then you break the social contract and you also go against John Rawls' Maximin principle. Do you understand that? Also, look at Plato's cardinal virtues. Plato's cardinal virtues are 4: prudence, temperance, fortitude and justice. Prudence means wisdom. आप wisdom दिखाते हो तभी तो आप persuasion यूज करते हो, noting यूज करते हो, तो ये आपका wisdom है. Temperance is self control, कि कुछ भी हो जाए मैं नहीं बिकने वाला. That's a kind of cardinal virtue. Fortitude, you show courage. ऐसा नहीं है कि मिनिस्टर ने बोल दिया और आप दब गए और आप अब वही कर रहे हो जो मिनिस्टर कह रहे हैं. You're showing courage. That's fortitude. That's a cardinal virtue of Platonian ideas. Justice. Justice means you do justice to the weak and vulnerable sections of the society, also to the animals and the plants which are living in the forests. Do you understand that? When we have a look at it from, say, John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism. Utilitarianism says there should be maximum good for the maximum people. Maximum benefit to the maximum people, maximum happiness to the maximum number. That's the slogan of utilitarianism. And it is a consequentialist normative ethical theory. तो आप एक चीज देखो कि according to Mill, we should look for long-term pleasures and not short-term pleasures. And in the long run, if forests are not cleared, a forest patch is preserved, is that good for the society? Yes, definitely. In the long term, if we augment our resources, will it be good to use it in times of crisis? Say for example, during the corona pandemic time, all the government resources, the sources were choked, but yet the expenditure continued because there was good handling of the public funds, or the custodians have handled the public fund in a right fashion. Do you understand that? And देखो, also by Kantian deontology, we showcase that Kant said that you need to do the right thing, and the right thing is what you should focus on, not on the action or not on the consequences of the action, but the action itself. That is duty based ethics. तो आपकी ड्यूटी क्या है? ड्यूटी है पब्लिक ट्रस्ट प्रोटेक्ट करना, पब्लिक फंड्स को मैनेज करना और अपने पर्सनल इंटरेस्ट को पीछे रखना पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट से, इररिस्पेक्टिव ऑफ द कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस. जो होगा होगा, ट्रांसफर हो जाएगा, हो जाने दो. Do you understand that? So, according to Kantian duty-based ethics or deontological ethics also, you see that it is the most appropriate thing to do. If we have a look at Carol Gilligan's Ethics of Care, this is feminist ethics, which says that you need to show care towards the weak and vulnerable sections, even to the plants and animals. You do not want to destroy them just to create a project because the minister is saying so. और देखो, जब आप ये करते हो, you will writing a note or you are writing a letter to the chief secretary, cabinet secretary, and you are not writing or you are not making a ruckus in the media, मतलब आप, you are not demeaning the administration, then you are also following the Aristotelian or Aristotle's golden mean principle. It means that you are avoiding the extremes and you are focusing on the mean. According to Aristotle, the extreme are vices, whereas virtue lie in the center. So आप मीडिया में भी नहीं जा रहे हो, आप कुछ नहीं कर रहे हो, ऐसा भी नहीं कर रहे हो. Cowardice is also a vice, recklessness is also a vice, but fortitude is a virtue. और आप courage दिखा रहे हो and you are writing to the chief secretary. आप अपने senior के बारे में लिख रहे हो, उनके भी senior को. So obviously it takes courage, but you have to be right for that. You cannot do that. You cannot demean your senior just to create some sort of politics in the office. Do you understand that? So that is what is important. So by the social contract viewpoint of Hobbes, John Rawls' principle of justice, Plato's cardinal virtue, John Stuart Mill's rule utilitarianism, Kantian deontological ethics, Carol Gilligan's ethics of care and Aristotelian's golden means. हर तरीके से आपका डिसीजन सही है. Do you understand that? तो ये तो जस्टिफिकेशन भी हो गई, मॉरल मैपिंग भी कर लिया हमने, एथिकल जजमेंट भी ले लिया, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट भी देख लिए, डिलेमास भी रिजॉल्व कर दिए, हमने डिसीजन भी, ऑप्शंस भी बता दिया और डिसीजन भी ले लिया और उसका रीजन भी बता दिया. नाउ वी नीड टू क्लोज द केस. तो क्लोज कैसे करोगे? मैंने कहा था कोट के थ्रू कर सकते हो. सो आई एम यूजिंग हियर अ कोट. मार्टिन लूथर किंग जूनियर सेड, इनजस्टिस एनीवेयर इज अ थ्रेट टू जस्टिस एवरीवेयर. अगर आज इनजस्टिस हो जाए उन फार्मर्स के साथ या उन लोगों के साथ, ऑल्सो यू कैन थिंक ऑफ द स्टेक होल्डर्स में एक स्टेक होल्डर आप सोच सकते हो, रियल एस्टेट प्लेयर्स, दे आर ऑल्सो स्टेक होल्डर्स. सो द ऑनेस्ट रियल एस्टेट प्लेयर्स, उनके साथ भी इनजस्टिस हो सकता है. एंड दिस विल नॉट बी अ गुड प्रेसिडेंट. Kant said, do not do anything which you feel, if it becomes a universal principle, might hurt the society. So if you set a bad precedent and if you feel that everyone starts doing it in the office, what would be left of the public services? It would turn into a joke for everyone. Do you understand that? So that is what, friends, I wanted to talk to you with respect to the case studies. Which you feel, if it becomes a universal principle, might hurt the society. So this is what I wanted to talk to you with respect to the case studies. So is there any questions? Is there any questions?
So one question, Dr. Suresh.
Okay. Can I get the question?
Should I say answer?
Yes.
Explain how to incorporate the views and thoughts of various scholars into the case studies, and also explain how to interconnect them with the course of action.
Now see dear, the point is, the question is, for the benefit of all, I am repeating the question, is asking that how to incorporate the various scholars, thinkers in the case study, and how to interlink the various ethical ideas, thoughts, etc. See, this will come with practice. इसका और कोई आंसर नहीं है. This will come with practice. Clear? So practice is the only solution through which you will do it. But yes, आप ये कर सकते हो कि for starters, what you can do is, देखो 3 normative basic ethics है, consequentialism, deontological ethics, virtue ethics. सबसे एक एक ले लो. एक कोई इंडियन स्कॉलर ले लो, गांधी, विवेकानंद, स्वामी दयानंद सरस्वती, बुद्धा, महावीर, जिद्दू कृष्णमूर्ति, आदि शंकराचार्य, कबीर, नानक, किसी से भी एक थॉट ले लो. आप कुछ कोट्स आप तैयार रखो रेडीमेड, विच यू कैन यूज डायरेक्टली इनटू द एग्जामिनेशन एंड इट विल बेनिफिट. Clear? So that's it, friends, from my side. I hope the session was beneficial to you. So thank you very much.